Developing tonight, Hillary Clinton is taking hits from fact-checkers across the board after her latest attempt to explain away her ongoing email scandal. On Fox News Sunday, Mrs. Clinton standing by the false claim that she never sent or received classified information on her homebrew server. And now she is saying that FBI Director James Comey actually agrees with her. The Washington Post's nonpartisan fact-checker giving that claim 4 Pinocchios, which is its worst possible rating, meaning that's not true. Watch Mrs. Clinton on Fox News Sunday and then watch what Director Comey really said.
Director Comey said that my answers were truthful and there were decisions discussed and made to classify retroactively certain of the emails.
110 emails in 52 email chains have been determined by the owning agency to contain classified information at the time they were sent or received.
I relied on and had every reason to rely on the judgments of the professional with whom I worked.
That any reasonable person in Secretary Clinton's position should have known that an unclassified system was no place for that conversation.
So, Judge Andrew Napolitano is our Fox News senior judicial analyst. He's here with more. We don't really need a judge to explain to the audience what we just saw there. But go ahead.
A child knows the difference between lying and telling the truth here. Mrs. Clinton really attempted. Chris Wallace didn't fall for it. The audience hasn't fallen for it. The media hasn't fallen for it. The Washington Post supports her candidacy for president. They gave her their maximum of 4 Pinocchios. What the director said was, we didn't find any falsehood in what Mrs. Clinton told us.
Right, which would be a felony.
Correct.
So she was smart enough not to lie to the FBI.
In a secret 3-hour, non-recorded interrogation. But it is clear that she lied to Chris Wallace, and it's clear she has been lying to the public about whether or not she received, opened, read, sent on to Sid Blumenthal, her colleague and friend who works for the Clinton the Clinton Foundation, who had no security clearance, material that was secret or top secret. Some of the materials so secret the FBI agents investigating this did not have the security clearance to read it themselves.
And now the claim that I relied on my advisors.
That is damnable, and I'll tell you why. Her inner circle of 7 closest advisors were just interrogated in a Civil Freedom of Information Act lawsuit under oath. I read the transcripts of all of their testimony. Guess at whom each of them points as the originator, the progenitor, and the creator of this scheme? Mrs. Clinton herself. She didn't rely on them, they relied on her, and now she wants to throw them under the bus.
That's fascinating. Well, quick question for you, though. Given all the misstatements she's made about her emails on camera many times, what should she have said? What, if you were advising her, I mean, what would be a way that she could explain all those and not dig the hole even deeper?
I don't know, because just like your previous segment about Donald Trump getting in the fight with the Khan family, she gets in a fight over the truth, and these things take on lives of their own.
Yeah, there's no good outcome.
It would be out of her character for her to say, I stand chastised. This shall not happen again. I'm sorry to tell you, her character is to lie. It has been her modus operandi going back to the Whitewater days.
She had a 34% honesty rate. 34% of the American public believe she's honest before the DNC. Went down to 30 after the RNC, and now it's back up to 34.
Look,
right. Climbing back up to her previous heights.
What Director Comey did not tell everybody was, on her first day in office, she signed an oath saying, I will recognize secrets, whether they're marked as secret or not, and I understand my legal obligation to do so. She failed.
Oath schmoth. That's the judge in you coming out. What did it really mean? Was it in fine print?
It means very little to her.
Great to see you, Judge.
Good to see you.
Well, while this was playing out on the Sunday shows, a new film about Mrs. Clinton became the highest-grossing documentary so far this year. In a just-released clip from Hillary's America, filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza explores a claim often heard from Democrats that the Republican Party is racist.
I want to name some prominent people who have been involved with America's racial history, and I'd like you to tell me simply if they were Republicans or if they were Democrats.
Okay.
Let's begin with the inventor of the positive good school of slavery, the idea that slavery was a good idea, Senator John C. Calhoun.
Democrat.
What about the writer of the Dred Scott decision authorizing slavery and claiming that blacks have no rights, that a white man ought to respect, Roger Taney?
That sounds like a Democrat.
What about the founder of the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who was also a Confederate general?
Democrat.
Let's now talk about a few more figures in American history who resisted racial oppression. Abraham Lincoln.
Republican.
His Secretary of State, Seward.
Republican.
What about the two leading senators who championed the cause of abolitionism, Thaddeus Stevens and Sumner?
Well, they were Republicans.
What about Frederick Douglass, the runaway slave who became a champion of the abolitionist movement?
Republican.
Well, there you have it. Dinesh D'Souza is a documentary filmmaker and creator of Hillary's America, the smash success thus far. Dinesh, great to see you. So why are you releasing this now?
Because I think most people don't know this stuff, Megan. I think that if you asked most Americans, and most black Americans in particular, which was the party of slavery, segregation, and the Ku Klux Klan, they would say that's probably the Republican Party. But the truth is that that was the Democratic Party. It has a very sordid history. It's never acknowledged it. It's never made any restitution for it. It's never apologized for it. What it really has done is taken the blame for what it did and put it on the South or put it on America. So
how did the narrative start to change in this country such that so many people just say, oh, those Republicans, they're racist?
Well, part of it is that the Democrats have put forward this idea of a big switch. And the idea is that the Democrats became racially enlightened in the 1960s, and all the racists became Republicans. Now, this notion of a big switch is completely fictional. It rests on one guy, Strom Thurmond, who was in fact a Democrat, a racist Democrat. He did become a Republican. But all the other racist Democrats, hundreds of them, we put actually in the film a list of 1,500 racist Democrats on the screen. Less than 1% of them switched to the Republican Party. So the big switch is actually, Megan, a big lie.
You know, affirmative action is one issue on the Republicans, on which the Republicans generally object and the Democrats generally favor it. That's something that some folks use as evidence of, racial bias on the part of the Republicans.
But it really isn't, because if you think about it, the affirmative action is really a form of racial preference. Now, the Democratic Party had racial preferences for whites for many, many decades. Now they have racial preferences for blacks. Both are equally opportunistic. They had the racial preferences for whites to maintain the Democratic Party as the party of white supremacy in the South. Now they're doing it to basically buy votes. In either case, it's cynical exploitation. It's not really a principled stance.
Last question. Do you ever sneak into the back of the movie theater and watch your own movie?
I do, and the sight of people just standing up and applauding at the end and tears streaming around their cheeks, Megan, it's the most beautiful feeling in the world.
And then do you sneak out, or do you proudly walk the aisles like, Dinesh D'Souza, does anyone know me?
Well, it's sometimes I'm in the back of the theater and no one knows I'm there, and it's really fun to watch. That's probably the best, because I'm seeing people's unedited reactions.
It would be nice to have some hugs after the fact if they love it, though. Dinesh, it's great to see you.
My pleasure.
Breaking tonight, the 2016 general election debate schedule is out, and Team Trump is claiming it's rigged. We'll show you why when John Dickerson joins us with his take. Plus, after Ben Shapiro agreed to speak at DePaul University, some unhappy students complained. And Ben joins us live to explain why the cupcakes were so upset.
Racist go home! Racist go home!
Kelly.
A new reaction tonight to the 2016 general election debate schedule. Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton are set to meet for 3 contests this fall, and twice those debates are up against big-ticket football games. Mr. Trump is not happy.
I'll tell you what I don't like. It's against 2 NFL games. I got a letter from the NFL saying this is ridiculous, and I don't think we should be against the NFL. I don't know how the dates were picked. I don't know why those particular dates.
Joining me now, host of CBS's Face the Nation every Sunday, and a man who's no stranger to moderating debates, John Dickerson. He's the author of the new book out tomorrow, Whistle Stop, My Favorite Stories from Presidential Campaign History. John, great of you to be here.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of this? Is Trump trying to get out of these debates?
I don't know. So is he trying to get out, or is he just negotiating? Everything is a negotiation with him. He prides himself on that. So what's he trying to get? It is a plausible case to make that he wants as big an audience as possible, because if his campaign strategy is grow the pie in the part of the party or the part of the country that he has the best chance in, then he really needs to grow the pie. And the people who are watching football are in that pie, and he wants them. And so it makes logical sense with respect to his strategy. It's just you never know where he's going. So this could also have some other design we don't know yet.
So now I feel that I have inside information on this, which will come as a surprise to some folks. I think it's about the ratings. I think it is exactly what you just said. And to me, there's no doubt about it, because when Trump and I did our interview in May, and I asked him to sit down with me for my Fox broadcast special, the number one thing he wanted to know is what we were up against. And there was a very competitive show that got 17 million viewers that night or something. It was the season finale of something, and a main character was being killed off. And he's smart. He knows about ratings, and he says they call me the ratings machine. He likes big ratings.
Right. So he likes big ratings, period. But also his strategy for winning the election he's got to get big ratings in a certain part of the party, that the people who haven't participated before, because he's losing some votes that are in the traditional Republican coalition to Hillary Clinton at the moment. Maybe not so likely to get them back. So his theory has always been grow that group of voters, the working class voters that he's been trying to get.
How do you think this campaign compares to the others documented in your book?
Well, so let's take first, we've got two candidates who have very high unfavorable ratings. So if you go back and look, the last election where it was like that was 1884.
Oh, wow.
You had Grover Cleveland, who had a child out of wedlock, was getting in trouble for that. And then you had James G. Blaine, who had scandals, following him like just, like tin cans tied to his ankle. And both of these people people looked at the election and said the lesser of two evils. And that's not unlike the way they're looking at this one now. And then there's the question of Donald Trump, who is a totally, unique figure. The last businessman, 1940, Wendell Willkie. But there are even parallels. My favorite one is 1964. There was a Stop Goldwater movement, which looks exactly like the Never Trump movement, and it was equally successful. At the end of it, Richard Nixon said to Pat Buchanan, if there's ever a Stop X movement, you always want to be with X, because X, if somebody's trying to stop him, it means he's got the people behind them. And Nixon was first against Goldwater, but then ran out in front of the parade and was for him.
What do you think define the importance of these debates in this season? They're always relatively important, right? But is it especially important this time around, Trump v. Hillary?
It depends. If it's still true that there's about 20% of people that are sloshing around that we've seen in these polls, then those people are going to be looking for who's the most presidential. If it's also true that what the Trump campaign says, which is the key test is whether Donald Trump can occupy the presidency, whether people are willing to hand over the office to him, or is he too risky? The debates can help him. They're actually a chance for Donald Trump to show, I can perform in this context. It's a context that people think of when they look at the debates. They think, oh, that's what a president looks like. If he steps into that and can occupy it, then he's able to clear that, what they say is the single question he has to clear.
And there can be just a moment that changes your opinion of a man or a woman, in this case, in the debates. Look at, when Romney backed down on the Benghazi thing, which a lot of Republicans said, what are you doing? Because Candy Crowley and they were like, what are you doing? George H.W. Bush looking at his watch,
Sure. Al Gore harumphing when George W. Bush was when George W. Bush was debating with him.
And getting in his space.
Right, and Ford not knowing that there was Soviet domination of Poland. Now that was there's a big upside and there's a huge downside.
It's fascinating, in our position. I mean, if you're lucky enough to actually be sitting there front and center, but even as a viewer to see how they deal with the pressure.
Right.
And so it is somewhat telling.
Yeah, and people look at him and think,
Whistle stop.
Yes. Suitable for gifts.
So
Megyn.
back in the day, I used to share an office with Major Garrett, who is also now at CBS News, but he was with Fox News. And I would like you to tell him I said hello, and tell him I now have bought all 4 of his books on Amazon for $0.01 each.
What am I supposed to do with that information?
I hope this one costs more.
Yeah.
John, thank you.
Thanks, Megyn.
All the best. Well, new details in the 15-year-old murder mystery of a Washington intern who turned up dead after having an affair with Congressman Gary Condit. The man convicted of her murder was released from jail over the weekend, and coming up, her parents are here to tell us why they think a murderer is walking free. Plus, Ben Shapiro just got banned from speaking on one U.S. campus, and this is not the first time the little snowflakes have tried to silence him. He's here on what he did to make them so angry this time.
No violence! No violence!
Breaking tonight, the nation's largest Catholic school has now banned a popular conservative speaker from speaking on campus. A student group from DePaul was recently trying to get Ben Shapiro to speak when they received the following email from an administrator. Given the experiences and security concerns that some other schools have had with Shapiro speaking on their campuses, DePaul cannot agree to allow him to speak on our campus at this time. And while Ben was met with censorship and unruly protests earlier this year, he says this latest situation reveals a serious double standard. Ben Shapiro is an attorney and editor-in-chief of thedailywire.com. Ben, great to see you. Here we go again.
You too.
What is it
exactly.
they say is so objectionable about you?
Well, what I love the most about this situation is that they don't even say that what I'm saying is so terrible. Instead, what they say is that because I've been met with violence at other campuses, this raises security concerns. So in other words, they can't keep their own students from assaulting people, so therefore they can't bring in speakers who disagree with the students. So basically we now have the rioters' veto.
It doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
If they get violent, they have to protect the student from the students.
Because in the guy's letter, this is the, let's see. He is the student, the guy, okay, Bob Janis. He's the vice president of facilities operation who sent out this email. He doesn't make clear what it is that you say that's objectionable, but he seems to be trying to be getting covered by saying, if you want Dinesh D'Souza or Dana Lash, you can have them, but Shapiro,
I have no idea. I mean, honest to God, Dinesh D'Souza was dangerous enough the Obama administration jailed him, so I have a feeling that it has nothing to do with my views.
They
had a Palestinian terrorist, convicted terrorist, a couple of years ago, right? They actually had a woman named Razmia Oda speak on campus a couple of years ago. She's actually a convicted terrorist. So I think it has very little to do with what I'm saying, and much more to do with the idea that these administrators are so gun-shy of controversy that they don't want to tell their own students to, what they really should tell the students is, guys, you seem a little bit excitable. Hand out some free pot. Everybody will just come down a little bit, and then everything will be all right. But I guess they're unwilling to do that.
But that's the thing, is if you think the students are going to get unruly because they don't like what a speaker is saying, then you might need to hire a little extra security. Do you stand for free speech, or don't you? And this is how it's been eroded at the edges, and it's getting a little closer to the middle now, Ben. It's not even just at the edges these days.
Yeah, that's right. And what my biggest problem is that what they're really doing is they're equating words with violence. So they're saying that the students get violence, therefore my words must be the driving factor in them getting violent. If this is how things are going to be from now on, free speech doesn't exist, because it really creates an incentive for people to get violent at protests and get violent when speakers come, to make sure that people, like the people they disagree with, don't get to show up on campus anymore.
Mm-hmm. Free speech, the First Amendment is there to protect controversial speech. It's not there to protect speech everybody agrees upon and finds very flowery and lovely and rainbows and unicornsy. It's there to protect speech that may upset you, may be somewhat incendiary, because that's the speech that needs protecting. That's actually, DePaul, what we happen to stand for as a country. Okay, Ben, great to see you.
You too.
Every time they cancel him, we're giving him a forum here at the Kelly File. Every time. And then we're just going to let him talk. One of these, I'll just give him an hour. He can just talk. He can say whatever he wants to say for a couple million people. Will that rate?
Yes.
All right, coming up. Over the weekend, the man once convicted of killing 24-year-old Chandra Levy was released from jail. This was a stunner. And her parents are here next on why they say the prosecutors got this wrong.
His 2010 conviction was based largely on the testimony of his former cellmate, Armando Morales, who told the jury that Guandique confessed to killing Levy. But numerous reports say a neighbor of Morales, named Susan Prowler, secretly recorded him weeks ago saying he made the whole thing up in exchange for better prison conditions. Now for Chandra's parents, Susan and Robert Levy, who have already endured a public investigation, lengthy trial, and intense media scrutiny, the nightmare of their daughter's murder has resurfaced, or as Susan Levy says, quoting, "It kind of puts you back to the level of grief that you originally had." As for Robert Levy, he says regardless of the recordings, he is still convinced Guandique is the killer, and that lead detectives on the case agree with him. He also questions Prowler's intentions, asking, quote, "Who is this woman? What is her motivation for doing this? The case is already solved. You have to wonder why a person would do that." Now, Guandique will be deported back to El Salvador, and the Levys, who are already heartbroken, can add anger and disappointment to that list.
Unbelievable. Trace, thank you. Joining me now, Chandra Levy's parents, Susan and Robert Levy. Thank you both so much for being here on what is obviously a difficult matter for you. Let me start with you on this, Susan. Yeah. Do you believe, why do you believe that this man, Guandike, is Chandra's killer, notwithstanding the fact that the conviction was mostly, I'm told, based on the testimony of this person who's now been outed as a liar?
I don't know for sure, but it seems like the prosecutors have enough evidence. I will always ask myself why a scream from the apartment and 911 call from there and no tape. But if he is the killer, I'm quite concerned that he could come back into the country and do more acts. As I understand, he was once deported, and I have to say that I'm very surprised, but when Donald Trump was at the convention, or when he was talking, he said about illegal immigrants, I really thought, well, you know what, he might be somewhat right. There are some people, not all immigrants, but there are people that can do bad things, and that they could be unsafe and they can come into the country.
And we saw that with him. Even if he didn't kill Chandra, as you know, he was convicted, but now it's been overturned. He attacked two other women in Rock Creek Park, Bob, and he was in the country illegally, and now he goes back to El Salvador, but he's going to be free.
Yeah, that's a problem. You know, he was rightly convicted before a lot of circumstantial evidence, because he was the one in the park who was attacking women, and Chandra was there that time, and she was found there. So all the evidence pointed to him. There wasn't anybody else who was doing that. Certainly not Gary Condit, although, you know, he was not necessarily a nice person, but he wasn't involved directly.
Can you speak to that? Because a lot of people remember that she was having a relationship with him, a romantic relationship with him, and so many people believed, and the defense argued that that Congressman Condit might be the killer.
Yeah, but there's never any evidence for that. I mean, he's not necessarily a nice guy, but there's certainly no evidence of that, you know, and it was just, there's a lot of evidence against Guandike. In fact, the witness who testified against him was probably telling the truth, and then this lady comes by and she secretly tapes him, which is illegal in Maryland, and she convinces him to say things which he would normally say. I don't think he ever said that he lied about Guandike. I think he may have said other things that the prosecution says he seemed like a guy who turned around, and then he was talking all this bad talk to this lady who somehow
the
got
reports
to do
were
that.
that the key witness Armando Morales said in the recordings that he did lie when he testified that Guandike had admitted killing Chandra. Susan, go ahead. I'll give you the last word, ma'am.
This lady is, you mentioned Susan, her name is, she has a couple of names, Bab Washington, when she contacted me, and her real name is Barbara. How do you say it? Paula?
Who knows? I mean, she's got some other names too, and she's had some records. So you know, who knows what her motives were? Who knows who hired her or who did that? You know, I don't know about
it's a little odd that
the gangs or who's involved in doing that. I mean, why would she even do that?
I gotta go because I'm out of time. But listen, I want to tell you both, Susan and Bob, all our condolences to you. Thank you for speaking out, and so sorry that this has brought up the grief of the loss of your daughter. We'll be right back. We are getting lots of feedback on the Trump-Khan family controversy. If you have thoughts on it, go to facebook.com/The Kelly File. Follow me on Twitter @Megyn Kelly. It's great to be back here in New York. Waiting to hear from you. Thanks for watching. I'm Megyn Kelly.